Welcome to Changing Suits. We're your hosts, Val
and Taj, discussing the latest news, views, and general life for us Western Asians.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Hi, welcome to another episode of Changing Suits. My name's Val.
And my name's Taj.
Today we're going to be discussing a really important topic, racism. And the reason we've decided to talk about it today is because of the racism that is currently going on in football and the amount that is in the media. Now, the Euro 2020 racism which took place really highlighted to me as to how bad the issue is. Not only in sport, but also in general life. Now, the reason it was so important at that point was because England was obviously doing very well in the Euros. And, it was a really nice time, even for me. I'm not into football, so I don't tend to watch it. However, I was into the Euros. And it actually did. I think it was said quite a few times on there, and I did actually genuinely feel this, that it was a sport amongst everything that was going on, the pandemic, how rubbish life was actually at that point. It felt like everyone was on the same side. But then as soon as it then went the other way, how quickly it turned into a racist issue. Now, had England won that match, obviously it would have been swept under the carpet. But then because they lost, and unfortunately the way that it happened, it really brought it to light. Literally the second that it happened, the racism came out. What was your experience of that football match, Taj?
It was shocking to see and to think that it's still happening now. It feels like times haven't changed. And it was okay when they were winning. We were all British and, everyone was together. But as soon as those goals were missed, were they seen as British players anymore? I don't think so. There was a complete turn in what happened.
It was funny because I remember listening to some of the commentary later, and I can't remember who said it, but they said as soon as, this is obviously one of the players who'd missed, because as soon as the goals had been missed, I already knew that those racist remarks would start. So obviously this wasn't the first time that these players were having this sort of abuse. And I was reading something the other day about the fact that football is one of the few places where employees go to work and expect to be racistly abused. Now, what's our take on, obviously this has happened again with the match that happened in Hungary. And again, I was doing a bit of reading, and from what I understand, there wasn't much done to prevent the racism from happening. What's your thought on that?
Again, another horrible situation where they were subjected to racism, and basically it was known that in Hungary that there is this racism that happens, and it was asked for that match to be actually played behind closed doors, but that wasn't listened to. And
but then this is the issue that I have. Now, football is there for entertainment purposes. It brings people together. It might not bring me to the football match, but it does bring people together. So even the fact that they were thinking of just doing it behind closed doors, do you not think that's the issue as well? So we haven't actually stopped the racism or addressed the racism. We've just, done it behind closed doors. Isn't that sort of going against the point of the football? What's the point in that case?
But it's a case of how can you change it is a slow process of changing people, educating people, but I don't know, how far can we say we have to educate? Hasn't that education been going on for years? And when will people change? That's the question. And will they ever change?
But where is that racism stemming from?
I think it's to do with propaganda, basically. I think it all starts from the media and the government, basically, divide and conquer. And for example, one of the worst things is immigration. Now, as soon as there were that, even the Brexit, actually talking about racism, was a whole racist thing in itself. Quite a lot of the BAME community felt that the racist remarks would start, and they were almost encouraged because of this Brexit thing. And it was okay to be racist. It was drawing out the racism that was in the country.
But then again, this going back to it, yeah, we can close, play football behind closed doors. We can allow racism to happen. Again, where is it stemming from?
It's the hate that's built up in people. The government, they want divide and conquer. Like again, I've just said immigration. Oh, the thing that you always hear. Oh, they've taken all our jobs. That's something that we always hear.
But see, the thing is, the part that I've got a problem with is, for example, Brexit. Obviously, people were very open in what I personally didn't get any racism during the whole Brexit thing, but I do understand that discrimination and violence against the BAME community did go up at that time. And again, you look at America and what happened during the years of Trump.
But the reason why you probably didn't get racism that much is the area that you live in. It depends on the areas that you live in as well. I don't know if the.
But what I was actually going to say was, yeah, so people were openly being racist. But that's the difference. They were openly being racist. So are we happier for a community where it's closed racism then? Because again, the Asian community is a perfect place for that, isn't it?
I mean, it is. But again, another thing with just the political side again, the Trump, him being in power, that encouraged racism as well. The Black Lives Matter, that movement started for a reason. And then we had the spin-off of everyone's like, oh no, but our lives matter. It isn't the case of no one else's life matters, but there was a reason why the Black community said that their lives matter, because it was seen in the country that their lives don't matter. Hence that, say, the slogan, would I say, Black Lives Matter, they're important. But then we got all these spin-offs of this lives matter, that lives matter. Yes, they do matter, but they're not feeling the pressure of what the Black community are. And that's where it stemmed from. And that's what I don't think people got that.
Okay, so what you're talking about is, I suppose, positive discrimination then a bit, but I don't agree with you in the fact that you're saying that the Black community was the only community feeling like they were racistly abused. There are many communities, even now, obviously, that are trying to use that slogan as well. The problem is, forget what color it was, whether it was Black, Asian, whatever the racism was about, the fact that the racism is there. Do you see what I'm saying?
I
I'm
know
just
what
gonna.
you're saying, but I was just wondering, why was it that the Black Lives Matter, which was and is very important, but how comes Asian lives were never, because quite a lot of Asian people were attacked as well after the 9/11. That wasn't a big thing. Is that because we don't stand together as a community when something like this happens?
See, I think that is an interesting point. A certain event has to spark a big movement like the Black Lives Matter. And the fact that it's still going, which is fantastic, footballers taking the knee, whether political leaders agree with the fact that they are making this, what do they call it? Political gestures, whether you
Well, like,
agree with it.
yeah, Priti Patel, she didn't like that gesture. And to openly say that, and that's another thing as well, you might be a different color, you might be from the BAME community, it doesn't automatically mean that you're going to support the BAME community. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing, something along the lines of that. And I think we've seen that with Priti Patel, to be honest.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the reason they've got her in that position, right? The
Yeah,
face, the face, the color matters.
well, quite a lot of the MPs up in power are the coloured ones, as it would be put. But it's good because they're showing, oh, we're getting the BAME community to implement all these immigration laws and policies, and then we're not racist because the BAME community are doing it. So it's a very good move that the government have done. But we can all see through it. We know what's happening. We're not silly.
But then wait a second. I think it's a fantastic move, the fact that they do have the BAME community in the cabinet, right? Regardless of what the policies are, and obviously the policies are made from the whole party, mainly the cabinet, down from the leader. But the colour does matter. If you were to see those MPs just as a child, I mean, you look at Camilla Harris, the fact that she's
Yeah.
up there as a female, a black Indian heritage, that's a fantastic thing. Regardless, I don't know that many of her policies. Whether I agree with her policies, which I know you're waiting to tell me that most
Yeah.
of her policies are anti whatever they're anti, but then most politicians are, regardless of the fact that they will be against race, anti this, anti that. But there's always racism in every party, though, isn't there?
Yeah, it is. But I think one thing that the Asian community we need to do is basically, all right, we see someone that's Asian that's become an MP, well done to them, brilliant. But we need to see what the policies are behind that. Are they going to support the BAME community? Because if they're not, then we might as well have not voted for them. What did we gain from them being in that position?
Yeah.
Again,
No, I agree with that. I agree with that. But then again, it's very hard because I think if you're going through it yourself, you're more likely to be more passionate about a subject, right?
well, yeah, for example, that MP, the Slough MP,
Yeah.
and
Can Jesse, yeah.
he highlighted in one of his speeches about being the racial discrimination that he faced from being really young. I mean,
Mm.
that was good because there's someone there from the BAME community and they're putting it out there that this happened to me. It's real. And I think that's important, really important to do.
But this is what I'm saying. So going back to Preeti Patel, and I know this turned into a very political sort of podcast all of a sudden, which that wasn't the plan, and we'll move on from this. But it is important to have those people of color because they understand what discrimination takes place. However, whether it supports the policy that they're trying to push ahead, that's a different question because at the end of the day, you do need to go with the party line as well. Okay, so let's move away from politics and move to, because I know that you've had a number of times where you've been racistly abused or, there have been issues. So tell us a bit about those.
So basically, in the first job that I started, predominantly it was a white. I was the only Asian in there, and I used to laugh about it. I was the token Asian. It's about a tick sheet. How many of the BAME community have you got in the workplace? And it felt like that, to be honest. And
But
the
then this is the
discrimination.
thing: is positive discrimination. You need it because if you don't have it, then you're not going to get those people into the job role. That's just the way it is.
Situation, what happened, it was psychological. So there were the three of us that started work, and there were two males that basically started, and we used to go out for coffee and everything, so they were really nice. And then one of them, I remember we were sitting in the office and he showed me this photo. Oh, Taj, look at this photo. I'm like, okay. He was standing in front of KKK building. I was like, oh, okay, what do you want me to do with this? I could only say, okay. There was nothing else from that I could. So obviously he was showing me, hey, I'm racist. Why else would you show that picture to someone? And then it was just, and I did go up to management because there was quite a lot that happened over a period of 3 years. I did go to management, and management just did not know how to handle it. They didn't know how to support me. And this was, I would say, about 15 years ago, probably a bit longer than that. And then, I've been in, like, all this time on, I've experienced racism again. And again, management did not know how to handle it. So times, I feel, haven't changed. Okay, there's been a lot of information about, hey, don't be racist, blah blah blah, but I don't think managers are getting trained on how to handle the situation, what to do, how to support people.
And then, okay, on that point, then, what would you have wanted your management to have done in that situation?
Well, point, he should be like, they should have spoken to him. He should have been called out for it, basically.
So, sorry, let me just clarify. What did actually result after you told management? And with regards to this, it was 15 years ago. Things may have changed in that workplace, but what did they do?
Nothing, to be honest. They just didn't know what to do. So I went to the union, and basically from there I spoke to them. And by then it was just too much stress. I couldn't handle it. It had psychologically just messed me up, basically. So I ended up leaving that workplace. And the next workplace that I went to, that was fine. If there was anything like, even, you know, you have that little disagreement, I just couldn't handle it because I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be in that same situation. And even till today, when there was, like, not too long ago, there was a meeting at work and it was about discrimination. I found it really hard to handle, basically, because obviously your past catches up with you and you remember those emotions that you went through. So that was very difficult for me. And like I say, I don't think times have changed that much.
Out of interest, what do you want to have happened in that situation? Because I get it that they didn't do anything. I mean, it didn't sound like anything happened. But what would have been your positive result?
Well, definitely I wanted him to be called up and then answerable for why he was acting the way he was. And I wanted him to be lose his position, basically, because this guy was not going to change the way he was.
Okay, so had he lost his position, he would
Mm.
have obviously not been very happy with you and the whole situation, in which case, surely wherever he did move on to, that wouldn't have changed the situation with him. I mean, he would have gone somewhere else and been racist, right?
So what would you propose?
It's a hard topic. So even for employers to manage the situation, it's a very tough it's a tough situation, because how can you re-educate someone? And then it comes down to freedom of speech, doesn't it? I mean, I was just looking at something, what was it, earlier today, where a stand-up comedian had told a joke, and he got a bit of a backlash on social media, so he decided to leave social media, and it's just like, all right, take a joke, sort of thing. And this brings up a really important point. At what point is something racist? Well, especially in comedy, and where does it overstep that whole freedom of speech? And the fact that it has gone silent for a few seconds shows how difficult.
I don't know what to say, to be honest.
Yeah, but this is the point I'm trying to make. It's very hard to find that balance. And I think that's where employers would also find it hard. And that's not to say that they shouldn't be dealing with the situation. At the very least, they need to be disciplining these people. However, what happens next?
I think if it affects someone psychologically or anything like that, then it's the wrong thing to do. And what you were saying, behind closed doors, well, we do quite a lot of things behind closed doors. As long as it doesn't hurt someone,
Okay.
that's what I would say. And education is important. I wouldn't say that we should stop educating people on it. I think we should start very young. And experience, I think also it makes a difference. For example, I know a lot of people that have lived in certain areas and they just have not been exposed to other communities, so they just don't know how to handle different communities. So I don't know how you would do. Maybe you'd have a bus that took these people people to another area, expose them, and then came back. There needs to be some sort of integration where they experience other cultures, other communities, so they can see that they're humans as well. That might be the thing, that we're all stuck in our little worlds and we're not seeing and being exposed to different kinds of ways of living.
Okay. And I completely agree with that. And I think it is because, I mean, even from a previous episode where we've said there is a lot that, unites us in a positive way, despite the fact that there are differences. I mean, on one of the first podcasts, that's exactly what I felt like the end point was for, East is East and the West is West podcast, where if you do talk to other people, you realize that you've got very similar things between communities. And I think you're right. I think we, as just general humans, tend to stick with things we know, right? Just like your experience in Norway, where you'd stick with expats, or
Yeah, I mean that was an experience in itself. So the expat community would just we'd be from all over the world, and we had a common reason to stick together because we were foreign to the country, and we could support each other from being out of our country. And there were people that came from Brazil, America, you name it, they were there. But we stuck together because we felt, yeah, you're right, we felt comfortable together.
okay. So this brings me up onto a really interesting subject: the Asian community. It is known to be very racist, and I mean, I personally think it's usually behind closed doors. What's your opinion on the racism within the Asian community?
Well, yeah, it's funny you should say that because with the Asian community, for example, if a person is really fair skinned, they're seen as to be beautiful. Where if they're darker skinned, they're seen to be, oh my God, they're dark, they're not pretty, they're not beautiful. Hence why you get so many women that bleach their skin. And that's a big thing in the community as well, because they want to meet those expectations of the community, looking pretty, being fair skinned. Watching Bollywood films, quite a lot of the Bollywood actresses are really fair skinned because they're seen to be pretty. There might be the odd one that isn't, but that's very rare, to be
But
honest.
then here's a common thing within most communities. That's the same thing that happens in most communities. Even I was reading something the other day about there's I can't remember the actor's name, but it was the guy in Fast and Furious, and he was saying because he's darker skinned, he's a black man, and he's darker, he lost out on roles to people that were black but lighter.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's an eye
Exactly, and so
opener.
it's not just again. Here's your common thread that racism doesn't just happen in the Asian community; it happens within the Black community itself as well.
But I wonder where this stems from. Is it because we're exposed to all the media as white is superior? And is it to do with colonialism? And even in India, when the British had their Raj in India, it was again the white were superior. And even I know it's probably the only book that I read, but in Pride and Prejudice, I remember there was a bit of it where there was one of the women that were out in the sun too long, and she was seen to be beneath everyone. Even on the marriage front, it still happens today. If like 20 years ago, if you got married to someone that was white, the gossip that spread in the community was wow, like wildfire. And if an Asian person walked in with a white person, everyone would turn their heads and be like, the shock, the horror in the community. But it's not so bad now because it's becoming a bit more accepted. But if you were to marry a black person, that's oh my God, they've married a black person. And that does happen in the community.
I mean, the thing is with the Asian community, obviously you've got things like the caste system. Even if it's not the caste system, in most communities, religions, whatever, there's always a divide. Whether the divide's, a hierarchy.
So even in the caste system, for example, in India, the higher classes are fairer in skin and the lower classes are darker in skin. So yeah, it still happens and it's still going on. And if you marry someone that's of a low caste, it's frowned upon.
I mean, I think the other interesting thing is the fact that we are saying the higher classes, the lower classes, and yet it might sound like it's prejudice only happening in India, but it is very much here in the UK as well, isn't it? I just want to bring in my own experience of racism. So I haven't personally experienced outward racism. I haven't had anyone swear at me. I haven't, had it myself. However, when I say outward racism, that doesn't mean I haven't seen it from the other end. So I have noticed, I've worked with quite big companies, and one thing I did notice in one of the companies I worked with, and I was with them for quite a while, was the promotions were generally happening to people that were white, that usually didn't have as many family commitments. So not only was there racism, I mean, sexism and any other ism, I suppose, was being shown there, but it is a very big company. Um, so I'm sure they covered themselves very well. But I mean, you could see it just from my sort of project in that company. I mean, the other side of it was when I was in council. I mean, when I first joined council, it was a case of white, older age men that are in there. Now, that completely changed towards the end of my experience, which is fantastic because, especially when it comes to politics, and I know I keep going back to politics, but you do need a range of people in there because if you don't have that range, you don't have that experience of different cultures, discriminations that you need to work against, and any policies that need changing because of this. So it needs a representative of the community. I still think there's a long way to go, but it's definitely going in the right direction. So from my experience, it's been positive in that respect.
I mean, one of the things that we've discussed in the past is about going to uni. Now, in my uni, I was in a class basically with quite a lot of Asians, and on trains, we had quite a lot of people that travelled that were Asian as well. And then when we got older and started getting jobs, there wasn't that many Asians on the train. So where did all these Asians go, I wonder?
I think the other thing is, if we don't talk about this, I mean, there was a conversation I was listening to on the TV where it was an Asian woman, it was a Chinese woman, in fact, talking to two white women, where it was sort of being the racist side of it was being brushed under. And the reason I join it to what you've just said is because I've spoken to a friend about exactly the same thing. She was a white lady and she hadn't actually realized it because obviously,
What, she hadn't realised that she was white,
no, she
or
hadn't realized that there was an issue with the fact that there was Asians going into uni, but there was white people that were going into jobs. So again, where did the Asians go? I mean, they were getting educated, but all of a sudden they've disappeared, or they're not getting those jobs in London. So just the fact that that awareness had been raised slightly, I thought that was interesting. But the reason I go back to this program was what happened in that program was the white women basically didn't want to talk about it. But then the Asian lady said to them, look, I want to talk about it. I am different from you. I want that awareness to be raised. So I think the other thing that we need to realize as a community, and when I say community, I mean everybody, regardless of whether you're black, white, Asian, it doesn't matter. Let's not ignore the fact that we are different as well, because that's the whole point of the reason we started this podcast, or the reason there's reports by government that talk about racism, because racism is there. And if we don't learn about people's cultures, then we're never going to break those barriers down, in my humble opinion.
yeah, I completely agree. I mean, for example, I remember I was working in a position, and one of my managers came up to me, and he innocently asked me, but I found it funny. He goes, "What do you have for breakfast?" And I just paused for a little while, and I was thinking, okay, where is this going?
Did you
I was like,
did you say Cocoa Pops because they're brown?
I did think actually Cocoa Pops, but no, I said cereal, toast. And he was like a bit like, oh, okay then. But his question was very innocent. And later on, I found out that he was brought up by, like, his father was very racist, but yet he was a nice person, and he just wanted to be educated. So I don't think there's anything wrong with someone asking those questions if they're just genuinely inquisitive about them. Because how else are they going to learn if we don't share and communicate? I mean, it has to be said in a right way, not to offend the other person. But he asked as a genuine question.
But see, this is the thing. I think sometimes we're too scared that we're not politically correct, which is why we're too scared to say something. So I had this an experience where I was talking to my ex-manager, and he was an Asian man married to a white lady, and I can't remember the conversation, but I said something like, don't know, whatever the conversation was, but Caucasian, and he was like, what on earth is a Caucasian? Right? Me trying to be politically
Yeah,
correct,
yeah,
and he was like, you mean white? I was like, yeah, I guess, but we're politically correct. What is it? Where it goes too far, and you're not saying what you need
yeah.
to say.
I mean, yeah, I completely agree, because we had to double think actually some of the phrases that we used, because we were going to say black people, and then we thought, is that being racist? And then we thought, no, Black Lives Matter, so no, it isn't. And then you do kind of start juggling, is it right, is it wrong, and then does it get too, you just have these crazy thoughts in your head that, oh, I don't want to be racist, but I need to say what I need to say.
See, I actually asked
um
one of my friends who's a white lady um, about whether it was okay to say white and black because she's married to a black man, and she goes, yeah. But then again, I suppose so. She's my measuring as to if I'm being racist or not, which I'm obviously not trying to be racist, but that it doesn't come across that. And she's like, no, that's fine. I mean, I'm white and he's black. Duh, duh. But again, it's where that sort of line is with other people, where you don't want to cross it.
yeah, I mean, I had a friend and he came over, and I go to him, oh, you look a bit darker, and he's mixed race, and he's told me so many times, but I keep forgetting. which is annoying. But then, yeah, so he's mixed race, and I go to him, "Oh, you look darker because are you tanned? Were you sitting out in the sun?" And then I double thought what I said, and I was like, "Oh my god, I hope you don't think I'm being racist." And he was like, "No," but then that's that mutual friendship, just knowing the other person as well.
But see, even with our kids, I've had a few experiences where, my daughter, she was young. I remember she said something that there was a black man, but I was too scared in the fact that she'd said it. And I'm like, well, she said it innocently. Surely the fact that I'm stopping her from saying it is a negative. Because obviously I'm doing it from the point that I don't want to offend someone, but she's not trying to offend anyone. So
Yeah.
even with our kids, I find, where is that line before you're too scared that you're going to offend someone?
I mean, with
So
your kids, have you started teaching them about color, about
um,
different people having color,
I
different
don't think
people having color? You know what I mean?
I don't think I've actually approached that subject. Yeah, I haven't. Someone had given me a book where, and the schools are doing this really well, where they're really trying to introduce different types of families and things like this. And I remember there's a book someone gave. I can't remember who gave it, but basically, we're different, but we're the same. That was the message of the book. So even now
Oh,
in
that sounds good.
education, they are trying to, and from what I understand, my kid's school is trying to look at different family structures. Like I said, some families have a mum and dad, some have two mums, two dads, someone has stepkids, that sort of thing. Because now times have changed. Kids need to understand that what was normal before, normal, I'll put those in
Speech
speech
marks. Yeah.
marks, is now the new normal, is different people have different things going on.
I mean, yeah, I completely agree. With my kids, I haven't really spoken too much about color because when I do approach that subject, for example, my daughter just doesn't understand the concept. And the reason why we did touch on the subject was because she was learning something at school and it was about Africa. And we just happened to start talking about black and white people. And she just didn't understand what a black person and a white person was because she was literally thinking a black person is black and a white person white. And from there, I just didn't know where to go next. So I was like, no, you just don't worry about it. It's okay. We'll park that there. I mean, we will bring it up again because we'll have to because we're Asian and, it's something that has to be discussed. But I just didn't know how to approach that subject.
But isn't this the point? In which case, how, the education needs to start when they're young, because I think trying to educate the older generation is obviously harder than.
But do we need to tell them about color? Because to her, she doesn't. I know it's a cliche saying, but she doesn't see color. For example, when she used to go to school on a bus, she had a different driver that was taking her one day, and basically, one of the driver, her normal driver, was white, and the other one was a dark Asian. So I go to her. All right, it was a bit sneaky of me doing this, but I just wanted to test the waters and see if that saying was correct.
Yeah.
And she goes, "Yeah, we had a different driver." And I was like, "Okay, so describe what this driver looked like."
Yeah.
So she goes, "He had eyes, he had a nose, and had a mouth." I was like, "Okay." That's
So
all
she
I
picked
got.
up she picked up the main features then, at least.
Yeah, but she didn't. At no point did she mention color at all because it just didn't register. So that saying for me, I think it is true.
But then at what point do we introduce it? Because
So,
we've just said that we do need to highlight these differences, and at a young age. At what point do you introduce it? If she's not seeing color, surely this is a good time to say, well, not talk about the specific color, but from where certain communities are from. So, for example, where our family has come from India, so the sort of traditions that go on in India, not actually saying, oh, we're Asian, so this is what we do, because not all Asians do the same thing, right? Or same thing, yeah, but the same thing. Not all black people will have the same sort of culture either. You have to go to the specific countries or areas. So it's not even about the color of their skin.
but I mean, with her, there's a different avenue that I have to go down because she covers her head, and not many girls cover their heads, and especially at her school. So she has seen that and she's felt it, and she said it that she's different to other people. So what I've introduced and said to her is, there's nothing wrong with being different. everyone's important in their own way. And sometimes she gets fed up with people asking her why she covers her head. But I said, if you want to cover your head, then you need to have a reason behind and basically educate people why you're covering your head. Don't be afraid to say it. Be confident. Are you ready to still keep covering your head? Because I didn't pressure her to do that. It's just the community that she's come from that she sees a lot of people cover their head. So she decided that she wanted to, from a young age, cover her head.
Okay, so this brings us on to another topic. Well, not it's the same topic, but we've discussed other communities. Let's go back to the Asian community, because obviously your husband's got a turban, my husband's got a turban as well. Now, obviously, since what happened in America with the 9/11, racism against people that had turbans actually went up, right? Now, that's obviously got better. However, it's still an issue.
I mean, because we used to travel quite a lot backwards and forwards from Norway. He got stopped quite a lot because he was wearing a turban. And I remember even at airports, I used to make sure that I know you got to do it anyway, but I think I was just extra. Do not keep your eyes away from your luggage. You don't want to be blamed for being a terrorist. And basically, there was a suitcase once, and it was just alone in the airport, alone all by itself in the airport, but security had spotted it. But I was like, oh my God, I need to get away from it. I don't want to be blamed. The Asian person does not want to be blamed because because the connection, Asian, terrorist. Even I remember I was walking home today from school with my son, and he was pretending to have guns and shooting. And I was like, oh my God, I hope no one's seen him, because I don't want him to think, people to think that I'm teaching him how to be a terrorist, because I'm not.
Yeah.
So all these things that you're conscious of and you're worried other people might think this way or that way about you is because of all the media, for example. They highlight when there is some sort of terrorist attack or people being shot. It's usually the Asian person is a terrorist, but the white person has got mental health problems. The media does that, and it's propaganda, and that's fed
And
into
how do you
us.
deal with the fact that, obviously, for example, when you used to travel back from Norway, and he'd get stopped, how would he deal with it, and how did you deal with it?
I mean, he came really frustrated, and he felt aggravated and angry because it's someone's character being questioned. But I had to kind of calm him down, because obviously the situation could have escalated. So I had to calm him down, basically. But I understand why someone in that situation would get upset, angry, if you're constantly being stopped all the time just because you're wearing a
So
turban.
how would we as a community address that? Because it's not only people with turbans. I mean, I was watching some stand-up comedy by Ramesh Raghunathan. I think he's hilarious, but
Yep.
I saw it the other day. I think it was an old stand-up, but he was laughing at the fact that obviously he's got a beard and he's going through, through security, and it gets him nervous and all this sort of stuff. So anyone with a beard starts becoming a bit nervous. Now, if you're nervous in an airport, I mean, that's not a good sign anyway. I mean, that's when you
No, it
start getting a
isn't.
bit jittery, like, okay, and then it starts getting, other people start thinking you are actually a terrorist because you're a bit jittery. So
Yeah.
how would, I'm just wondering how you deal with that situation, because obviously with what's,
I mean, yeah. I mean, just sorry to butt in there, but even at airport security, you're like, don't speak Punjabi. Everyone speak English now, because we need to show them that we're British. And I remember we used to do that in India a
you're
lot.
obviously not going to Heathrow Airport where everybody is also Punjabi.
No, we used to do that in India quite a lot. Make sure that you speak English. Do not speak any Punjabi at all, because we need
it's
them to.
it's not even the Essex English that we normally talk, it's the Queen's English, so you're extra English, right?
Exactly, because you don't want to be stopped for being
Yeah,
Indian
fair enough.
in India.
Okay. All right, let me move on to something you've mentioned a few times in regards to the media. The thing that always comes to my mind and the racism and the media is, whichever side of the argument you are on the whole Meghan Markle. I remember when, before they got married, I was reading an article from the BBC, and I can't remember exactly what it was, But then, it talked about the fact that they're engaged and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, halfway through the article, they start talking about her Black heritage. It's like, wait a second. And I didn't feel like it was in a positive light. It might have just mentioned a few words, but I remember it coming up in my mind where I'm like, wait a second. They're supposed to be talking about an engagement. Why are they even talking about the fact that she's Black? Now, clearly, we know that she's Black as well, so we get it. But I do agree. I feel like the underlying messages in the media really do instigate people's opinions.
I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the media portraying immigrants as the ones do bad, basically. It's us against them. And even Asians do that now. Don't let them in the country, send them back home. And you're like, what? Why? Where did you come from? I think, even actually, we're hopping along backwards and forwards from subjects, but even like the inter-racism as well. Again, my daughter covers her head, and so do I. And there's sometimes, like in the Asian community, certain Asians do not want to mix with you because I look Asian, and because I cover my head, apparently that makes me look even more Asian. There's this one person that actually gives me dirty looks. She doesn't know me. I've said hi to her in a nice way, in a smiley way, completely blanks me.
Maybe that's where the issue is. You just randomly go up to her, say hi, and smile at her.
No, she's a parent in the playground, so I have no idea why. But anyway, and I've had that in situations where one of a friend at the time, she was asking about a certain issue, and she goes, "Oh, I asked my normal friends." Like, okay, so I'm not normal. I didn't say anything at the time, but it lingered in my head for a long time. Yeah, we put those divides between us as well, the inter-community thing.
Mm.
I mean, I must admit, like, for example, my husband, he's Asian, he's a turban man, but he hasn't got very much Asian culture. And rightly or wrongly, I call him a coconut because he just doesn't know, like, he doesn't even know who Gurdas Man is. Now, hello? What do you do with that?
Okay. I mean, see, words like this, and I actually found out another word the other day, which I didn't actually know was a thing. So apparently, a banana is something that the Chinese community calls someone that isn't Chinese enough as well. And I was, one of my
Wow, how
friends
does that
told me, I
work?
was like,
Why would that be? I don't understand the concept behind that.
the yellow skin, and I guess the white banana. I'm assuming it's that, but it's the same sort of concept as a coconut.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
it happens in quite a lot of
yeah.
community. But if it happens in the community, it isn't racist then?
How do you mean?
Because I know like certain comedians that I've heard use the phrase coconut as well, and we laugh at it because we can relate to what they're saying, we know what they're saying. And certain black comedians use certain words which I wouldn't be able to use because they'd be racist if I use them, but if they use them, they're not. So because we use those words, aren't we encouraging other communities to think it's okay to use those words? Because we're using them internally ourselves, so why isn't it okay for another person to use it?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
And if those words are wrong to use, and I'm sure the listeners know exactly what I'm talking about, if it's wrong to use those words, then don't use those words. Don't encourage other people to think that it's okay to use. It's okay for us to use it, but for not you, because then you're creating that divide, us and them.
But I think it's a context thing as well. If someone is being a racist, you know that they're being racist. Whereas if you're talking to a friend and whether it's right or wrong, I mean, I just feel like it's the context as well. Whereas if you're talking to a friend and they might say the same thing, but because they're a friend, you're having a laugh, it's not racist. It's just you're having a bit of banter. Surely that's the same thing with any word, right?
But then if you have singers and rappers saying certain words, that isn't having a laugh.
Mm.
That's you're exposing the public to that because you're not talking to a friend, but then you might argue that your audience are your friend and that you're trying to get them similar understanding so they'll understand what you're saying. But is it all right for another community member to use that word as well? No, it wouldn't be.
Mm. Okay, we're going to leave this subject here. It is an extensive subject, and we will be coming back to it again. This isn't the only podcast we're going to be doing on racism. But listeners, please do send in your thoughts and your experiences on our Facebook group and our Instagram, changing_suits, and join us on the next episode. Thanks very much for listening. Bye from me.
And bye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.